All right, welcome back. So for the spooky season of October, I decided to go into a couple of lean codes for that Ford Ranger. What you'll see is the diagnostic part of it was not quite as straightforward, and I wanted to show you that in detail. As with these 4.0, so this is a 4.0 overhead valve, they have a tendency to throw the codes P0171 and P0174, which is a lean code on both banks. So usually indicative of an air leak, but we look into that. What I'll do is I'll have a time at the bottom for the end of this video. If you just want to see what my conclusion was and what I think it is and how I'm going to fix it, but if you want to see the entire diagnostic process and everything I did to get there, please enjoy and understand the spookiness that are lean codes in cars. So hopefully you guys can enjoy and maybe learn something or teach me, because obviously it wasn't as straightforward as I was hoping. So enjoy. All right, just got back from picking up some wood. Started another little project here, but drove this truck. I looked at some of the trims during idle, but this thing is running lean. So what that means is that the system is adding fuel, and we have to look at the short term and the long term for that. So it's actually a bit of a cool day this morning, and what I find is interesting is that it doesn't run quite as lean when it's cooler out, so it's not as bad, but as the truck was warming up, it was leaning out. But you'll see here that I think we have it around like 10 or like 11% or 13%, and both the banks act the same. So I've had it up to 25% when it's really hot and I'm running the AC and stuff. So what's going on is we have a leaky valve cover, and with this truck that does cause lean codes. So what we're gonna do is get to work and do the valve cover on this. All right, so there's like a jackhammer and stuff going on, a bunch of road construction. So let's just tear this down with some tunes. Here's number 1, or number 4, excuse me. That looks really, really good. Well, that one's running lean. That was number 2. Or number 5, excuse me. A little on the white side there. A little lean on 5. A little on the lean side as well. Okay. All right, so we're back. It's the next day. I'm gonna torque this lower intake mount down. I have it set to 17 foot-pounds. I think it's between 15 and 18 for this top. And we're gonna start in the middle and work our way out. That way we know that we have it torqued down correctly. Work our way over this way, just to see where these ones are. These all feel pretty loose. So I think we're sensing a theme here. Lean. May even have a little pre-detonation on there. So a good thing we are addressing this. Yep. She has water in it. So this thing's misfiring because it has water in there. I did tighten it down, so we'll keep an eye on that, but the lower gaskets were definitely an issue, so. So you see here, right there, is the lip. That one sits pretty good, but this one over here, that has a pretty big step on it, where my finger is. I'm hoping that the cork gasket really can fill that in, but doesn't look too bad in here. All right, first startup, let's see what happens here. Got any fluid pouring out? Nothing there. Didn't seem to have that misfire, so that's good. Sorry, needs to come off. All right, let me go get the scan tool and we'll see how these numbers look. All right, she's been idling for a bit. I have the AC cranked, really trying to get it warm. Usually by now you smell burning oil, so that's not there. So I do think the valve covers fix that. Idle sounds great. We'll take a look at the numbers. We're going to do a test drive, but I'm thinking everything looks really good. I've just been watching the radiator too, right in there, see if I see any bubbles. It was bubbling a little bit in the beginning, but I think it's just burping itself. Yeah, see a bubble? We'll keep an eye on that, see if that continues, because that's a head gasket problem. But that's the only thing I'm worried about at this point. I really think that the air leak is at least tamed. So let's go take it for a run and I'll let you know if anything funky happens. Not fuel pressure. That's perfect. Okay. See here. This is the fuel pressure after turning it off. I'm not seeing anything indicative of a leak down. Well, it's still going rich, like really rich, mostly when it's hot. I didn't see any air coming out of there. I don't think that that's a leak. Plus the one that we saw would just be indicative of it on one side there. Something is off electronically on this, because both sides read the same. Here's it still sitting. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the fuel pump or anything. So I don't have any smoke anymore, so the valve covers definitely fixed that. I don't have any drips, so it's not like it's leaking or anything. It's just when it gets really warm, so like when I have the AC on and you know, when it's like 100 outside, which obviously in the summertime here, it's 100 a lot, it seems to run really, really lean. But when it's not and it's cooler outside, it doesn't run lean. I am trying to figure out why that is. So weird. And the temps and everything seem to work out. Like, I mean, the coolant temp seems just fine. The air temp coming in is fine. This seems fine. I will say that this is aftermarket though. And the other one I had, I believe, was the same. They're Duralast. I just don't know if it's worth it getting another one. Maybe I'll see about getting a cheap one and see if that changes things, because this could definitely be an issue too. But I just don't think that there's a leak that pronounced. And when we were driving, I mean, it was down to 0. Like if I hit the gas, the air fuel mix was perfect. So it's just something at idle. Something at idle when the throttle's up. And this is new. This is a Motorcraft throttle position sensor. So Motorcraft, that's Duralast. But everything else I've been getting is Motorcraft. So what would cause it to do that when it gets hot? Because it almost barely creeps into the 10% when it's cool outside. I took it out when it was 70 the other day in the morning, and it barely got over. It was at 9% for most of it. I thought something happened, but just when it's hot. I'll do some thinking about it, but I don't think that there's a vacuum leak in that engine enough to do that. All right, so we're back. It's probably been about a week since I looked at this. The temps were insanely high, so it wasn't really healthy to be out here, but it's back to normal temps. But I did some thinking, and one of the big problems we have is it's lean on both banks at the same time. So it really tells me there's got to be something with incoming air being the issue. I looked at all the vacuum lines. I couldn't see anything, but when we were in last time, I torqued down the lower intake manifold to spec, and that has basically cured our startup issue with that third cylinder. However, what I didn't torque down while I was in there were these. So these studs, you have these bolts that do the upper, but these studs here with that Torx head shape, let's see if I can get a good look. Those actually screw down the fuel rail here. And there's a mount that goes underneath of that for air. And I have a little suspicion, seeing as the lower intake bolts are so loose, these might be loose as well. And what's nice is that we don't have to take apart anything to get to them. All we have to do is loosen up the bolts on top and see about putting torque to them. And they're not very much. I believe everything I was reading was 11 foot-pounds. So let me get you set up, and we'll get those bolts on these studs loosened up and see about torquing those down and see if they help us at all. So let's see. Let's light this puppy. See how she works here. All right, we have her in the PCV hole there. Oh yeah, let me take, we'll see. Before I take it off, let's just run some air through this and see what happens, huh? Okay, see if we see any smoke coming from anywhere. A lot coming from my jar, obviously not a good seal there. Starting to see it. Yeah, it's coming from down there. Down there. Yep. All right, so we found out the bad news. Kind of what I was thinking anyways, but it's nice to know that it can affect both cylinders the same. So the lower intake manifold gaskets need to be changed, and more importantly, the gasket where it seals to the lower block there, that's going to have to be done up with the proper amount of RTVs. So I'm sure that this has never been taken apart, and with how loose those bolts were, it sounds like this is a really common issue with these 4.0s. What I'll do is I'll order up the parts, we'll get this thing parked, and start yanking off the top again. Sadly, we have to do the valve covers again, but those are super cheap, and I mean, we're gonna have to yank off everything anyways, so I'll see. I mean, we got the new plugs and new wires and everything, and the belt looks pretty good. I think that's fine. I don't hear any squeaking. Everything else looks like it's running really good. All the sensors seem good. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll order up those gaskets, and next time I see ya, we'll have this top end totally torn off. Hopefully I can get some good video for you guys. All right, till next time. I'll say it again. I am not sponsored by Black and Mild, but if they want to send me a hat, I'll definitely wear it in the videos, because these things are gold for testing the little smoke thing for leaks. So they're my go-to, and if they want to, send me a hat or some swag, I'll definitely be promoting that, because they are perfect for this. Don't smoke them because they're hella gross for smoking, but for testing, man, they are sweet. All right, so I see it coming out of the corner of this valve cover here, right over right here. I don't know where my finger's at. It's kind of blurry, but it's coming out of there. It also appears to be coming down from here somewhere. Let's see if we can get an angle on it here. Okay. See if we can see any smoke coming out here. All right, here we go. Start pumping here. You'll start seeing the smoke coming out. So it's obviously coming from the valve cover over here, but it appears to be coming, I'm gonna get some good pumps here. It looks like there's some smoke coming from lower here, and that's making me think that the seal for the lower intake manifold may have an air leak as well. I think what's happening obviously the valve cover is going to be an issue, which we did replace, so which kind of stinks. So I got to see what's going on with that. I remember that corner kind of being up a little bit, so I'm wondering if that may need some RTV in that little corner next time we do it. But what I'm going to do is, I believe that the air leak is coming from down here, and that's going to be where the lower intake manifold meets up with the engine, and that is a pretty common area for this thing to leak. There seems to be a pretty good one coming out of the valve cover, but definitely we need to address that. But I do think that the lower needs to be sealed up. I bought all the stuff for it, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that off camera, and once everything's buttoned back up, we will check out how it looks. But this smoke machine here that I made at least got me in the right direction. It kept me from checking the upper intake, because I was really stuck thinking that there was a leak up here. Now I'm pretty certain that I know for sure it's at least this valve cover, but I believe that the either this valve cover too, or the lower intake where it meets up with the engine there is going to be the issue. So at least it got us in the right direction, and I'm just going to do the whole thing and make sure to really be diligent about RTV. And so we'll check back in a little bit after I get it all done, and then we'll look at the numbers. All right, thanks for joining me, everybody. Let me know when you're ready. All right, so I want you to watch at that screw. Once it pressurizes, air's gonna start coming out. Now let it pressurize, and you'll start seeing the bubbles come out. Takes a few seconds, but it gets really bad. See the bubbles? And it's like that with all of them. So all of them have varying degrees of vacuum leaks around the threads. So I don't know if you guys can see it right there, the fuel rail, those are bubbles. So the gasket below the fuel rail is leaking air, so that's where the air is coming out of. What I will do, we'll bring this back into the backyard, and we'll tighten down these studs. So I think I tightened them down to like 11 foot-pounds. We'll double check that, but obviously it's still leaking from that gasket, so it's kind of interesting. But it's leaking from the top, so where the fuel rail touches the bottom of, or touches the top of the gasket, is where the air is coming from. So we'll see. Hopefully, hopefully retorquing it down helps out, because I really don't want to have to put a new gasket on. But yeah, it's coming out of these threads, which means it's coming out from the bottom here too. So that's where all the air is coming from, is that gasket down there. And like I said, it's new, so I'm hopefully maybe a couple heat cycles helps out. I'll retorque it down and see where it's at. But yeah, I think that we found where the leak is. So I'll see what kind of fixes I can come up with, but and I'll let you guys know. But that seems to be the journey with the Ranger. So hopefully next time I see you guys, the numbers are looking a little more promising. All right, see ya. So what you're seeing there's air actually coming up through those threads for the fuel rail. And it's coming even through the bolts there, which is interesting because I don't see it coming from the bottom of the bolts. It's just coming through the threads. And then I also did the air between the fuel rail and that little gasket set. So what's really interesting is I believe that is where the leak's coming from, and it's very dependent on how hot the engine is. which makes a lot of sense because when you go to idle is when it's really the worst. There's a ton of vacuum being pulled from that area. So behind the throttle valve and the idle air control valve is going to have a ton of vacuum. That's why they pull so much vacuum for different elements of the car from the actual intake manifold. There's going to be a ton of vacuum in there, and specifically right there at that fuel rail. So doing a little investigative research on that, the big thing I found was that that gasket that goes between the fuel rail and the lower intake manifold, the one that comes in sets. So you'll see on Rock Auto, you do like a whole set, it'll just be one kind of wedge that goes in there, and they sell that as the gasket. And then you'll see other ones and it just has two, paper gaskets, and then that's it. What I believe I found was that the correct orientation of that gasket is paper gasket, wedge, paper gasket. So you're supposed to have the two paper gaskets on the outside of that wedge. I didn't do that. And it wasn't like that when I did the lower intake gaskets. So what I'm getting at in all of this is that I think people are buying these gasket sets, doing the lower intake, because that's a very common fix that these need, because that's what was happening is coolant was getting to cylinder 3, they were loose. I redid the lower intakes along with all the gaskets up above, and it still had the same code, and it seemed to be where it's coming from is that it's worse at idle but almost zero when I'm driving, which is really interesting, right? So the more you open the throttle, it's gone, and it seems like that it's going away faster when I open it up and really coming back at a higher enrichment when it's at idle, especially when it's hot and you have the air going on and everything. But I'm thinking when we buy these sets, particularly from Rock Auto, which is where I got mine, I know a lot of people buy their stuff on there, you're gonna, the Felpro set only has that wedge. And I'm assuming whoever did this truck before me only did the wedge as well, because that's what it comes with, right? And so doing a little bit of research, I believe that you're supposed to have those three. And it's really hard to find because it's not in the Haynes manual. You can't just find gaskets for the fuel rail. It's all in these sets. So you just kind of see what's in there or what you have. That's one of the, what we kind of do when we're wrenching on our own, and just replace the same looking gasket, right? So I think if I get the paper ones, which I've ordered, they're coming in. So that's going to be the next video, is I'm going to show in depth how to replace that, and if it does indeed fix our problem. I believe that they are, people are doing the repair and only putting that wedge in, or, they're only doing just the paper, so they're not doing the correct orientation, and that is causing these prolonged issues. A good way to test it is like I did. I put compressed air into the intake manifold and I blocked off the ports that could leak. And so when it was pressurized, which is the same as vacuum, because you're gonna have a lot of pounds of vacuum pulling on that. So I did about the same for pressure. I guess it's a little bit different, but it wasn't much. I must have had maybe 5 pounds going in there, and maybe less. It was just a little bit coming out. And it was really leaking, and I'm sure it gets worse when it gets hot and everything expands a little bit. My guess is that we're doing these fixes and we're not using the correct gasket. And like I said, I did that little investigation. I went into an old, whatever they call them, the discussion board. Yeah, that's it. And someone actually came up with this problem like 10 years ago. And he actually found a one-piece wedge with gaskets on each side, and I believe it's for an Explorer, but it appears to fit the Ranger. It's the same engine, the 4.0 overhead, and they have it on Amazon. And I ended up going with just the paper gaskets, but it makes me think that that's what the problem is that we're putting the wrong gaskets on. And so you think you're doing all this stuff, and it's just leaking from right underneath the fuel rail. and it's very hard to detect because it doesn't react to carb cleaner because there's air coming. I think it's coming through the threads in the very top of the fuel rail where it touches the gasket, which is, you know, if you're spraying carb cleaner, there's so much air coming through the engine. And also, you don't really want to spray a lot of carb cleaner around where the plug wires are and stuff, as you would imagine. But yeah, I think that's it. We're going to replace it in the next part, and we'll see if it actually does fix it and what we have to do. So thank you guys for joining me. I know it was a bit long-winded in explaining it, but I hope that we found it, and I hope that we found the cause of the air leaks for these Rangers. Hopefully this helps people, and hopefully this next video cures that problem. And thank you for joining me again. Till next time.